Don't give up. Keep it going. Oh man. Oh man, I got this from Goodwill and I want to show it off. So admire it, admire it, admire it. Okay, moving on. So welcome back, y'all. My name is Amavi, or Abby, or whatever you want to call me, whatever you know me by. There are some things I won't respond to because they're disrespectful. I've never really talked about my whole flight training career. I think my past self 5 years ago would have wanted to know how things turned out. So I'm kind of thinking to do this as a time capsule, and then I'll do it again 10 years into my flight career. I never knew what I wanted to do my whole entire college career. So my parents didn't go to college. I'm a first generation immigrant. I have a ton of siblings. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I knew I didn't want to get married young, and I knew I didn't want to be a nurse. So out a lot of options. I will not play with you. I will not hold you on that. I will not lie. So I was kind of thinking, what do I like to do? You're like 16, trying to figure out what you want to do the rest of your life. And it's a difficult time because your brain is not fully developed. You haven't tried everything there is to try. You probably have not moved out of your parents' house yet. You're 16. You don't know, right? So you're trying to choose what to do for the rest of your life. That's a lot of pressure. And of course, life is about creating yourself and getting back to your childhood self, kind of what your childhood self enjoyed. There's so much that goes into this. I will get into it in future videos. But I really thought about it and I thought, I know I like things hands-on. I know I'm not the best at a traditional education. I can't sit still in a classroom to save my life. Maybe a trade school would suit me. So I started looking into EMT. I looked into being a personal trainer. I looked into so many options. I actually have like a whole list somewhere in my notes, in my journal somewhere, of like 30 options I considered to go for a career or for a degree or for a training program. I remember one time I was on campus with one of my friends. He was going to school to become a doctor in the Romanian community, and he was saying how he loves the way like hospitals smell and the way that they feel, and like he can't wait until he works in one day. And I kind of looked at him and I asked him if he was kidding. And he was like, no, like, I'm so excited about it. I can't wait to be in that environment, right? And I was thinking, that's how I feel about the airport. I don't feel like that about anywhere else. I mean, the library too, but going back into it, even when I was a kid, I would beg my dad to take me to the airport when we were picking up my bunica, my grandmother from Romania and Australia, and she would do these missionary trips, right? So we would go pick her up from the airport because we lived really close to the airport back in Portland, Oregon, and I always wanted to go with him, and he would be like, no, you're staying home. Like, why do you want to go with me so bad? I think most kids really like the airport. That isn't something weird to say, but other people get anxiety from being at the airport, right? So kind of just naturally noticing what type of person you are, what fits your personality, and as you grow into it more things become apparent. But don't fall for the lie that, oh, you change a lot as a person as you get older. You do, but also there are some things you love as a child that you never grow out of. I loved the sky, and I loved clouds, and I loved weather. I was like a super big weather nerd. I love that type of thing as early back as I can remember. I would read books about it. When I was younger, I had this little book that had like cutouts in it, so you would hold it up and it would be like the inside of a cockpit of a plane. And I think my mom donated it, to be honest, but I would run around the house with that. And I remember, I swear I was like 6 years old or 4. Like I don't know if I even had like a cautious yet, if that makes sense. And I was thinking like, that would be really fun to be a pilot. I wonder what that's like. And then I was just like, whatever. And I'm just a little kid and I pick up the book again and I was running around the house. So I haven't told that to my mom ever. But another thing I would always do is I would be on the trampoline in my backyard and I'd be looking up at the planes going by because we were under the arrival corridor for PDX. I've always lived within, 30 minutes of an airport, so we don't live in that house anymore, but that house was kind of my first introduction to aviation, I suppose, because we would see them passing overhead all the time. We'd be playing on the trampoline or swinging on the swings. We swing on the swings. I would also climb the tree because I am a chaotic child. I am a wild goose at heart, so I would be climbing the tree, and then I would just watch the planes or read in the tree and watch the planes go by. So we grew up with that exposure, but then also my mom would take us to the airport to watch the planes land. It was kind of like a free, cheap thing to do, so she would wrangle the cars, God bless her heart, and she would put us in the trunk, and then we would go there. Not put us in the trunk. She would wrangle us in the car, and then she would like pop the trunk, or we would just sit inside because it would be cold. Portland, Oregon. A quick interjection to say, fear means you have to do it. I had a lot of fear towards going towards aviation because, again, I don't come from a family I'm a first generation immigrant. I don't come from an aviation family. I don't come from a family that went to college, right? So these were things that you're like, oh, what if I fail? And then all the cups at Ross, the ones I'm talking about that say like, oh, what if you fail? Oh, my dear, what if you fly? Or something like that. But I think one of the biggest things was how much money it is. And I could make a whole video series on that. But to be perfectly honest with you, scholarships, saving and working up money since I was like 12, 14, 15, 16. I would babysit from before I could ever hold an actual job or resume, right? So my first job was at Old Navy. I worked in retail, and I just saved up for a very long time because I always had in the back of my mind thinking that I think I want to be a pilot. I think I want to do that. I'm going to continue praying about it and kind of going towards that. But it was this huge, scary goal because it wasn't just the money aspect of it. It was also, I didn't know anyone in aviation. So I started lurking around, right? In the beginning, I didn't know where pilots went to train. I thought they just popped out of the womb and went to go fly the 777. I did not know. This is why representation really does matter, because I did not see a woman pilot flying in the airlines until I worked for a major airline on the ramp as a ramp agent. And I have a ton of videos about being a ramp agent. So you can go see the red receipts for that. But I did not see a woman pilot until I want to say like 2019. I was 20 or 21. And I didn't take my first commercial flight until I was around 18. But I was fasting and praying about it, and I wanted to be a flight attendant in the very beginning. And I went to an aviation career day in my senior year of high school, or sophomore, whatever the third year is, I don't. So I went to aviation career day, and I sat in the helicopter simulator, and I remember flying it, and I made the instructor sick. Let me put that out there. I was not a good pilot. I made the instructor sick, right? And he was from Brazil. He was the sweetest guy. He seemed really genuinely in love with his job. But he was like, stop the sim. I'm about to throw up. But I fell in love because I realized, hey, the guy sitting next to me gets paid to do this with people all day outside in the actual world, not in a dark room with a simulator. So it kind of, the pieces clicked. And that was when I was like, why would I be a flight attendant when I could just fly the thing? And it still includes travel, and there's that element of math to flying, and it's a science, it's in the STEM field, and I've always been scientifically inclined. I've always loved that. So there was a moment where I was like, oh shoot, I'm doing this now. I gotta do this now. I'm gonna go for it. It's gonna be all or nothing. I'm not like, I keep my word to myself, right? So number one about me, I keep my word to myself. Number two, I do not give up no matter what. It's kind of a negative trait in some ways, but I will beat down, I will not give up. I will get it, or I will die trying. So there were so many little steps that went into this, you know, there were so many prayers that were prayed, there were so many DMs that I sent and people that I talked to. One of my first mentors in aviation, I reached out to her because I just saw another Eastern European woman in aviation. I was like, oh my God, like maybe this isn't impossible, right? And I'm saying representation matters. I'm going to say that the rest of the video, so get used to it. But I hit her up on Instagram, I DM'd her, I leaked into the DMs, and I was like, hey, let's get coffee in Vancouver, Washington, Vancouver. I grew up in Portland, Oregon. I'm right on the border of Washington. They're neighboring states. And I told her I'm about to enlist in the Air Force. Like, I don't know how to get into aviation. What do you recommend, basically? So I came to her, you know, at hour zero. I wasn't a student pilot yet, and I was just doing, before I was a student pilot, I would just spend like an hour a day on Google being like, what does this mean? What does PPL mean? How many hours do I need to be a pilot? I just did so much research. Doing my own research, a super important step. Don't expect people to do the work for you for your dream. I'm just real hard ass talk, okay? Auntie Abby is here. Going forward, I met Oksana. She gave me some advice. I started working at an airport, and that was my first job in aviation, which was a very big deal. I later got fired because I was too small to operate the equipment. I was crushed and heartbroken because they fired me, and I was like happily cleaning a whiteboard at the time. And then he called me down to the office room, and they were having pizza that day for a meeting, and he was like, hey, by the way, we're letting you go. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I went and cried in my car. And then I went across the field to a different flight school, got hired with them. I got hired with this flight school that was their competitor, and I was like, was with that first aviation job for a week, and then they fired me. There's a lot that goes on behind that, but I was like, you know what? I am a head shorter than everybody else and roughly 100 pounds lighter, but I just feel like I'm not gonna pull the sexist card on that, but like, So I move on to this second flight school. I started working there, and I met someone on the fuel line working. I was a gas girl. I would fuel helicopters, Chinooks, planes. It was fun. It was also terrifying when it was like windy and super rainy, and then some jet owner would call me to fuel their thing, and I was like, oh my God. And he passed me his business card, and he was like, hey, I have a Cessna that you can rent. I need it to be rented. I need it to be flown because I'm a business owner and I have 2 planes. I don't really fly this one, right? Everybody tells me these stories, and I'm like, that doesn't happen in real life. It happened to me, and I was like, yeah, whatever. I kind of threw away his contact. I was like, whatever. He's joking. He's not serious about it. But I was el desperado. I ended up contacting him, and he let me rent the plane from him. I started out wanting to go into missionary aviation. I have videos on this too, actually. So you can kind of track my timeline, but I met my flight instructor there, my first primary flight instructor, at a volunteering event. I did not get paid for that event, so I went, and that was technically my intro flight. I flew in a Caravan, a Cessna 206 Caravan. So before I go further in the video as well, I want to say representation matters. Don't give up. Be open to opportunity, but remember, I would bust it out saving money, working until forever, whatever Nicki Minaj and Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion all say. I've been working my whole life. I've been saving money my whole life because I had a dream in the back of my head, and I was like, I don't know where else I'm going to get the money from, so I'm going to just start saving. I was saving for years before I started flight training. I had a plane, I had a flight instructor, I had some money saved up, and I had been saving up for about like 3 years, I want to say, before. And going back, I did get my associates, you know, through the course of my flight training, but for a time, I worked, went to school, and did flight training, and ate a lot of rice and beans. And it was hard, I will not lie with you, but what I typically would do is over the winters, I would make money, and I would pass my written exam, and then I would go into training, the flight portion, and get my check ride done, and I would do that over like early spring into summer into early fall, because flying is pretty seasonal in Oregon. So I got my private with a minimum of hours of 43. I busted it out that summer, and then I went back to school in the fall. And what I'm trying to say is, if you have a dream and you have something that you think like you need to do, or you'll never stop thinking about it, do it, because at the very worst, if you fail, if you run out of money, if you get sick, whatever happens, remember that you're going to be 85 one day, and you're going to be able to tell your grandchildren, I had this dream and I went after it. I'm not going to be the bunica that sits there in her garden and tells her grandchildren that I never went after my dreams. I'm not going to be her. I absolutely, still hasta, know this. I will not be that person. So if there's one thing about me, I try to live my life with no regrets, but if there's one thing, truly, if there's one thing, no ragu, I want to live in a way that I have all these stories to tell my grandchildren. I want to have those stories when I'm older. I want to tell my grandchildren about the crazy, wild things that I did, that I went after my dreams, that I didn't say no to fear. It does take a certain element of privilege to say that. I know that. I'm fully 1000% aware of that. My parents are immigrants. I'm a first-generation immigrant. Putting that on the table, first-generation immigrant guilt is something you are always paying back. You will never pay that off. Never pay that off. Let's just be honest about that.